So, we are now in the section of Roman art, um, and we are in the Roman Republic. And this is the time we are at a period of the first emperors. So, the Roman Republic was a period where there was rule by many. This is a period after the expulsion of the Etruscan kings, which we didn't touch on, but it's not really important for the test, so don't worry about that. The Etruscan kings were expelled in 509 BCE, and so we begin this period of the Roman Republic with a rule by many. You have the Senate, and you also have the two councils. So there were two rulers as a way of preventing a single individual from becoming too powerful. And everything you see in red here is the Roman Republic at its height. So they controlled a lot. However, they did have a system of electing a dictator during times of crisis. This is a way that individuals they could make quick decisions when this was absolutely necessary. But of course, an individual who took advantage of this and who named himself dictator permanently was Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was an extremely popular military general who had lots of troops behind him, but names himself dictator continuously and then is assassinated in 44 BCE. And so this clearly is not well received by the Senate, but this also marks an important change because just 15 years later, um, you'll have your first emperor, Augustus, coming into power, and that's his son. He's also known as Octavius. Uh, he consolidates rule for himself. He does it quite carefully. He takes on new roles slowly, so he's kind of creeping into the leadership role. And he does become the first known emperor. So the first century, or as we move into CE, also known as the Common Era, or the AD period, we start to see the shift in Rome. There had been a lot of civil wars, there had been a lot of political upheaval, and then you start to see the shift towards consolidating power around one single emperor. Okay. So there's important change politically and socially, but also in the terms of art. Rome has a lot of influence from Greece, obviously. So it's important to realize that because they were colonizing or because that they were taking over areas that the Greeks had previously colonized, they were being exposed to a lot of Greek artwork. So it's also important to remember that so many Greek artworks that we see nowadays and examine today are Roman copies because the Romans appreciated that Greek aesthetic so much. Um, Now, in terms of copying their artworks, Romans really didn't believe, as we do today, that a copy of an artwork it makes it somewhat cheaper or lessens the value of the artwork. The copies were more like variations rather than direct copies for the Romans. They had small changes done to them. The variations could be made with humor, taking the serious and somber element out of the Greek art. So what we see in the Hellenistic period of Greek art, that very serious, stoic, sometimes like looks of the sculptures, Romans wanted to take a little bit out of that and turn it on its head. Oh, and then also importantly, we see the age of concrete. So Romans start developing concrete, making structures a lot more faster and stronger. We'll get more into that in a little bit. I'll wait for you guys to finish writing though. Okay, can I move on? All right. Oops. Okay, so yeah, to continue the overview, Romans created cities by dividing the streets and then spreading them outward. So, like we saw on the map, they very much went outward. Um, so, what does Roman art look like? We'll see in a second. The biggest achievement was their contribution to forming modern society as we know it, along with a strong military. So, who can tell us what other contributions Romans have made for us that we use today? Yeah, Alex. Yes. What else? We use this on the daily. We use a couple things on the daily. Yeah, Megan. Aqueducts, yes. We do use aqueducts, but we don't really think about it anymore, and they're very much evolved since then. Sierra. Yeah. So architecture, Romans, they developed domes. Good. But there's also, something that's just something we work towards, all our lives. Money, currency. So they also develop currency, coins, and we start seeing artwork on coins. So it's not just plain metal that's being traded. Also, yeah, let me just move on to the next slide because I'm jumping ahead. So Alex mentioned government, bless you, but also military power. They also invented fast food, street food. Yeah. Bathrooms and sanitation, correct. Currency, advertising and branding. And then our calendar, 365 days. City planning and roads, and copied Greek art. Oop. But copied Greek art in a good way, again. It's not like, oh, they copied them again. Okay? So moving on. Should I go back? No.
A lot of text to be able to get down, so I think you should start putting them on. I think it would be helpful. Yeah.
I mean, I'll put.
There's a lot of content per page. So
I get like one paragraph off each thing, and like I feel bad holding up everyone else.
Well, speak up. I could wait.
That would be a long time. That would be a really long class.
It's okay. Okay. So, going on to architecture, Roman architecture was unlike anything that had come before. The Persians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Etruscans, they all had monumental architecture. The grandeur of their buildings, though, was largely external. Buildings were designed to be impressive when viewed from the outside because their architects all had to rely on building it in a post and lintel system. So, Roman architecture differed fundamentally from this tradition because of the discovery and experimentation with concrete arches and vaulting. So, thanks to these innovations from the 1st century CE, Romans were able to create interior spaces now that had previously been unheard of. Romans became increasingly concerned with shaping interior spaces rather than filling it with structural supports as a result. The inside of Roman buildings were impressive, just as their exteriors were. Okay, so the first temple we're going to look at is the Temple of Fortune. It's the oldest preserved Roman temple. So, who could tell me what Greek influences besides reading that? So, let me go back here. What Greek influences do you see? Yeah, Sierra? Here, maybe in this photo you could see a little bit better. Yeah, good job identifying that. What else do we have that's similar that we see in Greek architecture? So, I don't know if you guys know, but up here we have a pediment that's also common in Greek. And then also, Greeks have this porch like area called a pronaos. So, remember the inside or the cella is called a naos, and then the outside porch area is a pronaos. Okay? So yeah, like Sierra said, we have Ionic columns, the peripheral style, the high podium or the porch has engaged columns. So one cella naos for trophies and weapons, so that would be on the inside again. It represents a well-integrated new type of temple designed for Roman requirements. Um, and then also, if you really study this temple, we notice kind of a difference. So in Greek, usually columns would be separate from the structure and would be freestanding and help with support. But in Roman, these are strictly decorative. You know, you don't really need these for support, and they are attached to the building rather than separated. And then concrete was inexpensive and you were able to shape it how you could and create large rooms without interior supports. I have a little bit of a video on this temple. And you know what? If you guys don't even finish writing, I have all of this in the recorded lectures anyway, so it is technically posted. Okay, so next we're going to talk a little bit about the Sanctuary of Fortuna. Um, and about this, we're more going to talk about the construction of it and Roman concrete. So, Roman concrete was basically developed in the early 2nd century BCE. The use of mortar, which is basically your mixture or your concrete mixture, as a bonding agent in ashlar masonry wasn't a new thing in the ancient world. Mortar in this case was a combination of sand, lime, and water, um, with proper proportions, of course. The major contribution the Romans made with the mortar recipe was they introduced a volcanic Italian sand, also known as pozzolana. Okay, and here we have a picture of it. It looked like that on the inside. So, Roman builders who used pozzolana rather than ordinary sand noticed that their mortar was incredibly strong and durable. It also had the ability to set underwater. So, a lot of formations or temples, they could be built right off the water's edge. Brick and tile were commonly plastered over the concrete since it wasn't really considered to be attractive or pretty on its own. But the concrete structural possibilities were basically endless. The invention of this type of concrete initiated the Roman architectural revolution. allowing for builders to be much more creative with their designs since concrete takes the shape of the mold or frame it is poured into. Buildings begin to take on a even more fluid and creative shapes. So, about this temple or sanctuary, this is a Roman complex of power. They transformed an entire hillside into this grandiose complex. They subjected nature to human will and created the first full blown Roman imperial structure. So, what that means is basically they took a hillside and they turned it into, something architectural. It was later discovered, or it's been discovered, but it was later damaged in World War II by bombs, but it still stands today. hmm And it's huge, and it's all made out of concrete. So another, we have concrete. We talked about concrete. Another big thing Romans kind of invented or perfected were arches. So Romans exploited the opportunities afforded by them to the architects to create really true arches. A true arch is composed of wedge-shaped blocks, typically durable stone. They were called voussoirs. Um, so they had voussoirs with a keystone on top that locked all of the other wedge bricks into place. In a true arch, the weight is transferred from one voussoir down to the next. So from the top of the arch to the ground level, creating a sturdy building tool. And then we have a barrel and a groin arch. Um, True arches can span greater distances than simple post and lintel. So they were stronger. The use of concrete combined with the employment of true arches allowed for vaults and domes to be built, creative, expansive, and breathtaking interior spaces. So, just like we did with Greek columns, it's important to know the sections of these Roman arches, which I mean is a lot easier to memorize than the Greek columns because there's just a few things that you need to know. And some of these things are just so, common sense obvious. Like, oh yeah, that's what that is. So, some key terms I'm just going to go over and talk about. So, centering. Centering refers to this right here. It's a wooden framework built to support an arch, vault, or dome during its construction. So, kind of like an armature, it's an internal support that would later be taken out. Voussoir, which is just a fancy word for wedge-shaped brick, and it would go along the arch over here on both sides. Then we have a keystone, which would be on top, right in the middle. Keystone would wedge into the apex of the arch, usually the last piece to go in when it's been constructed, and then later, once you put it in, it locks all the other pieces in place or position. Okay, vault. Vault is just a general term for an arched roof or ceiling, usually made of brick, stone, or concrete. Pretty straightforward. A pier, which are down here, is an upright architectural support, usually rectangular and sometimes with a capital or base. I'm going to skip barrel for a second. I'm going to go to buttress. Buttresses, which we see here along the barrel vault on both sides, these were projected supports on the side of an external wall. They usually counteracted the lateral thrust of a vault or arch within. And sometimes these would be decorative too on the outside. And then down here we have a barrel vault. It's a semicircular structure made up of successive arches. So it's like a continuous arch. If you just press copy, 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 copy on an arch, that's a barrel vault. And then a groin vault is the result of an intersection between two barrel vaults of equal size that produces 4 compartments with sharp edges. So it's just two turned barrel vaults. And then that's how a groin vault would look too, like a hallway or even a grand room. And then we have domes. Okay, so Roman cities were typically focused on the Forum, which was a large open plaza surrounded by important buildings. This area was civic, religious, and the economic heart of the city. It was also in the city's forum that major temples were located, as well as other important shrines. Also useful in the forum plan were the basilica, also known as a law court. And of course, there were other official meeting places for town council. Quite often, the town's fish, meat, vegetable markets, they spring up all over the town, surrounding the forum, lining the city streets, framing gateways, and marking crossing stood streets. Okay, Pompeii, Italy is an excellent example of a city with a well-preserved forum. And also lining around the forum or the city would be our aqueducts, where, from the outside of the city, they would bring in water for the city continuously. Like, it would not be stopped. There is no shut-off valve. So yeah, I just remembered that these are recorded lectures, so it is technically posted on there. You would still get all of these notes. Okay, then we have, this is what it would look like, our cross streets, city layout, and then a little bit about aqueducts. So in France, we have one of the oldest still working aqueducts. This is over 30 miles long and served the entire city, but we're not really talking about France. We're talking about Romans. Romans built aqueducts throughout their domain and introduced water into their cities. They built and occupied, and they really increased sanitary conditions. A ready supply of water also allowed bathhouses to become a feature in Roman cities. So bathhouses were usually places where people would go to congregate, hang out, take a bath, all that fun stuff. And also these were large pools where people would go swimming too. Here's a little bit of the structure of an aqueduct. aqueducts were always on a continuous gradient or lean, just so that that water would flow. And they were huge, massive, and they spanned for miles. So that concrete, you could really build fast and quick. And then here's a comparison of modern day and then Roman. So for us now, obviously everything's underwater and it goes into a treatment plant and then into the city. But for Romans, it was just straight out of the reservoir. Okay, thanks for today. Yeah, there's pictures of costume. Yeah, that's it. So once again, and I'm having hope for next week that more of you will take part. But again, I'm offering extra credit up to 15 points. This will probably be the last time I offer extra credit, by the way. So once again, like I asked in the Greeks, pick a topic that I didn't cover. So for Romans, pick a topic I didn't cover, and I'll pull this up and show you what I'm covering, just so you know what to pick from. But basically, not a long presentation, 5 to 7 minutes. And then you'll present and then also upload onto Canvas so that I could upload and everybody will be able to access this presentation for when it comes time to study for the test. Okay. So here is basically what I'm